Once again, greetings to those in the Diocese of Colorado Springs. In this video, I will be going over some of the comments that I made in response to those in my previous video, and also wanted to introduce a little bit more about what I'll be doing with this series specifically now. First, one of the difficulties I think that initially occurred with my previous video was that it was contrary to what other people were thinking, or what some people were thinking concerning Frannie Rose, and because of the differences in those ideas, certain comments had arisen. Comments such that I must be ignorant, or I may be egotistical, or I'm just trying to show people what I think that I know, and so on and so forth. I'm really not interested in ad hominem type attacks against my videos. All of my research and my videos is going to be very evidence driven, and so I am interested in conversations that focus upon evidence. And so in my blog series on examining Frannie, which at this point there's about 10 of them, and some of them are very lengthy and very detailed, presenting the evidence from over 9 hours worth of listening to her speak in context, and drawing out those teachings which are contrary to the Christian faith. I am more than willing to discuss that content with anybody at all. Initially, and this was one of the issues that some people had for some reason, was they thought that my response to the individual who thought that I was ignorant, for instance, I had requested of him after viewing my, I think maybe it was a 13-minute video, to refrain his judgments concerning what I think I might know about this ministry until the end, or at least be able to listen to more of the evidence that I'm going to offer. In fact, this person has not made any further responses to any of the links to my blog and the evidences that I outline in there, in which case I don't think anything further needs to come of it. But somebody had stated, well, that I hadn't done all my research yet. And in any endeavor, in any subject, one's research is really never completed. A reason being is because the person who that we're examining, or the ministry that we're examining, continues to speak. It continues to assert itself, and so there's always new things that are being said that can be quoted and that can be discussed, and so it's always an ongoing academic process. And it is to that which I'm alluding to when I say that my research is not done. My conclusions and initially were drawn out of all of the background discussions that were taking place within the diocese, discussions which probably 99% of people would not even be aware of. I read all those documents, and also had firsthand knowledge of discussions that had taken place behind closed doors that weren't written down, and that gave me sufficient knowledge in order to put together a conclusion concerning One Simple Voice. Okay, there was sufficient reason already at that point, and not just some vague suspicion without evidence, but all of the evidence at that point was directed in this way. And even in the midst of those conversations on my previous YouTube video, the more content that I was exposed to in my research, the worse it got. In other words, it continued to affirm that these suspicions were correct, that this research so far has been correct. And so just to address that, I think part of it has to do with this it really does come to one's knowledge concerning what the Christian faith is and what it cannot be, what New Age teaching is and what it attempts to sound like, and be able to differentiate between the two. And it happens all the time that people are influenced by the New Age movement. They don't even know that they're being influenced by the New Age movement. Even the people who are actively propagating these teachings don't know the difference between what they're sharing and what the Christian faith is, or if they do, they think that they have some sort of renewal or some additional teachings that they want to try to put together. I also made attempts to reach out to Frannie. I sent a message through her website asking questions. I wanted to do a written interview so that we would be able to get some exact answers to some very specific questions. And my intent in that was to try to draw out anything that I could use to exonerate her in her ministry. You know, maybe she had some clarifications, or she could share how she thinks that these things that she's saying that reflect New Age thought and concepts could be Christian at all. And unfortunately, the only response I get from Richard Hannafin was the fact that we think differently concerning the matter. There is nothing to discuss. However, I had difficulties with that because open dialogue has always been the way the Catholic Church has moved forward in discussing issues openly in councils and so on and so forth. It's always been the strength of the Catholic Church to discuss issues as they arise and to look at any differences that may come. In fact, even in the midst of ecumenical dialogue with those who do hold to contrary teachings, where they could sit down and try to see if there are any similarities without blurring the distinctions, and to do so charitably. So the idea of just simply stopping any further conversation or not engaging in any conversation is a little disconcerting, and actually is more destructive to their position, because they've shut themselves off from being able to exonerate themselves. And so I reach out in good faith to have an open dialogue concerning these evidences that we are presenting, and they don't want to have any official response to them whatsoever, which is rather unfortunate, but not unexpected. I'm willing to continue the conversation, look at any evidences that there may be, and I'm willing to respond to anybody who's engaging the evidences that I have set forth. So obviously I'm not interested in responding to ad hominem attacks against me. I'm more interested in the content. Some people think that just because you've never had a conversation with somebody, like they said, well, if you've never actually had a live conversation with Richard Hannafin or Frannie Rose, then you can't really know what they teach, and that's not true at all. People have been studying the thought of John Wesley for centuries, and I can assure you that he wrote copiously, all right, and very thoroughly. And today there isn't much argument or debate concerning most of the things that he taught, just from things that he had written. And no, nobody today has to have a live conversation with a person in order to determine whether or not what they are teaching is in fact heretical, especially when you have the public eye examining the exact same things. Anybody has access to the writings of John Wesley, or any other historical figure for that matter. And I think that people, get that point. Another person said that, I must simply just have a bias or some sort of personal agenda against Frannie Rose, and I don't. I wish her the best, as I would do for anybody else. I'm a person. I'm a seeker of truth. I like to examine evidence. That's where my faith is. That's how I know where to put my faith. It does make a difference where we put our faith. It's not that we have faith in something, but the object of our faith that is important. Okay, someone can have their faith that that Satan is going to overthrow the kingdom of God, and there are those who do in fact believe that. But we wouldn't celebrate that faith or that they have faith in something like that. So the object of one's faith is incredibly important, lest they accept what I just proposed. So I think it's important now at this juncture to look at this argument that just like, say, someone who has an anti-Catholic bias can have thoughts against the Catholic Church, and that they misunderstand Catholic teaching and take it out of context, and that this is what I am doing in reference to Frannie Rose. And I need to listen to those who accept her teachings as orthodox, and therefore, all of my concerns would disappear. Any quotation that I've ever used in the course of all my blog posts and anything that I will use is going to be contextual, which is why I not only look at the context of what she may say in an hour-length seminar or an hour-length radio interview, but I'm looking at her life as a whole. What do we know about her religious formation? What do we know about readings that she has recommended over the course of time? Who does she quote? The things like that, to kind of look at the broad scope of the context, even beyond what she might be saying at any particular point in a presentation or a book or anywhere else. And obviously, when I offer these quotations in the midst of my blog post, if people want to respond to those and say, no, she didn't mean that we become God, okay, although she uses that language, all right, or with that we become infinite mind, okay, no, we don't. If somebody wants to try to defend that and try to say that that's Christian, please, by all means, I want to hear what your explanation is. I'm very curious I'd be very interested in to see what great lengths you will go to in order to make two contrary statements the same. So once again, I'm going to be continually open to dialogue. Please, by all means, this is evidence-based, and I don't want myself to get in the way, okay, of any of this. So if you don't like me, you don't like the way I say things, how I say things, the words I use, please don't let any of that get in your way. I want you to just, with plain reason, to examine something on its own merits, and if it comes to that, you too have to accept that what Frannie Rose is teaching is in fact New Age thought, concept, and language, then that is what you must do. You must follow reason where reason goes. You must follow evidence where the evidence goes, no matter what you might think about me. So with that, I thank you, and I hope that you will enjoy this series.